organization. They accept no government funds for the very hard and excellent work that they do. During Mr. Holton's time with the center, he has directed the center's Divest Terror Initiative and Sharia Risk Due Diligence Program. He has been involved in education and outreach in more than 20 states. Regarding the divestment of taxpayer-supported pension systems from foreign companies that do business with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Sudan, and the Syrian Arab Republic. In addition, he has been involved in state-level counterterrorism and counter-Sharia initiatives in dozens of states. In 2005, he was a co-author of War Footing, published by the U.S. Naval Institute Press. In 2008, he was a co-author of Sharia Law and Financial Jihad, How Should America Respond? In 2015, Chris co-authored, along with the Center for Security Policy's Claire Lopez, The Gulen Movement, Turkey's Islamic supremacist cult, and its contribution to civilization, jihad, in America. Chris's work has also been published by the National Review, Human Events, The American Thinker, Family Security Matters, Big Peace, World Tribune, WorldNet Daily, Newsmax, and The Hayride. He has appeared on television on The O'Reilly Factor, The Glenn Beck Program, CNBC's Squawk Box, and Fox and Friends. On radio, he has guested on the Laura Ingraham Program, The Michael Reagan Show, The Brett Winterble Show, The Roger Hedgecock Program, The Michael Medved Show, and The Jim Bohannon Show. Chris has been a frequent guest speaker at Tea Party, Republican, and other gatherings from Florida to California. Before joining the center, Chris was president of Blanchard & Company, a $200 million per year investment firm, and editor-in-chief of the Blanchard Economic Research Unit. And with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Mr. Christopher Holton.
I've had a lot of people come up to me today and say, I'm so looking forward to hearing you speak. I've heard so much about you. And obviously they haven't heard much. Anybody that's heard me speak before knows, you poor people, this is not going to be uplifting. That's just not what I do, unfortunately. We're going to talk about Antifa. We're going to talk about Red China. We're going to talk about jihad. None of that is a happy story, unfortunately. But I'm going to tell it like it is. I tell you, I hate podiums, but I think I have to stand behind this podium because I think they're filming this. Being only 5'7" in my shoes, really is not comfortable for me. And then I have to stay 6 inches away from this microphone. At least I don't have to wear a mask and I don't have to use hand sanitizer. In my church, we have holy hand sanitizer now, not holy water. It's crazy. They did leave a knife up here. I guess I might have to defend myself. I told you all when I said I'd come speak that I was going to cover 3 topics. I was going to cover very shortly the threat from jihad, which still exists. There's some developments on that that are not widely known because the media is quick reporting that. And I'm going to talk about the threat from China, a little bit about the Wuhan virus. So notice I don't call it COVID-19, I call it the Wuhan virus because that's what it is. It's the Wuhan virus. And I encourage you to use Wuhan virus and not COVID-19. I don't care what the doctors say. It came from Wuhan, China. And when I was growing up, wherever it came from, that's what you named it. There's nothing racist about that. That's just where it came from. So it's the Wuhan virus. And then I'm going to talk about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I'm trying to cover that as quickly as I can. And I'll start with the threat from jihad. Some of you may have seen me speak in the past, but I'll ordinarily brief as the Muslim Brotherhood threat here in the United States. I've given that speech probably 150 times over the past decade or so. Not going to go into that today, but I will say this. I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in on an online briefing in the past few weeks, put on by a government agency, which I'm not allowed to mention. And I expected, it was a briefing on the terrorism threat, and I expected that they were going to focus on white supremacism. We've been hearing for 2 years now from the media and from a lot of politicians that the big terror threat now is white supremacism. So we've been trying to get smart on that, and it's been tough to find much information on that. It's just not a whole lot out there. So we expected that this government agency was going to brief us on the white supremacist threat. That's not what happened at all. The whole briefing was about jihad, which tells you maybe something about what the real threat is, and maybe what's being hyped by people who have a political agenda with regard to some perceived threats out there. The whole briefing was on jihad. And one of the things that came out of that was they know that ISIS and Al-Qaeda have been doing the same things that all of us have been doing. How many people here work and have been using Zoom and things like that? Well, so with the jihadis. They've been briefing their people here in the United States on Zoom. They've been recruiting using Zoom, and they've been detected doing that. And what we were told is, as a result of these activities, that it shouldn't surprise us if we see a spike in jihadi activity here in the United States in the coming months, because they've been actively recruiting during the pandemic. That's what they've been doing. That's going to cover my talk on the jihadis, which is my area of expertise. So the rest of this is going to be something that I'm not an expert in, but I've been trying to get smart in it. What I'm going to cover next is China. Most people don't want to accept this, but we are in a Cold War. We have an adversary, and it's Red China. And even my colleagues at the center snicker at me when I use the term Red China. They say, that's anachronistic. You can't say that. And I say, well, that's what they are. And when I'm 57 years old. I came up during the Cold War. And it wasn't such a bad thing to refer to them as Red China. And that's why I refer to them now, because that's what they are. The communists are still in charge in China. All this stuff you've heard over the years about how they're capitalists now, and they're our friends, and they're not a threat, that's a lot of horse folk. It's a lot of horse, you know what, actually. The Chinese are now basically rich communists, and they've enriched themselves thanks to everyone in this room. We have enriched our enemies. Milton Friedman was a very successful Nobel Prize winning economist. I'm sure some of you are familiar with his work. And he said something that was very instructive. He said that capitalism and free enterprise was necessary for liberty, but it was not sufficient for liberty. So what we have in China is a capitalist system coupled with a totalitarian communist political system. And out of that, we've gotten very wealthy communists who are targeting us every day. They're targeting us with cyber warfare, they're targeting us with economic warfare, and they're targeting us militarily. A lot of people do not realize the degree to which Red China has massively built up its military over the past 20 years. They were able to do this because of the meteoric rise of their economy. They became very wealthy, and they were able to modernize their military over the last 20 years. For instance, at the time of Desert Storm, China had no blue water navy to speak of. we had a very large blue water Navy at the time of Desert Storm. Basically, it was Reagan's Navy. He had been out of office for a few years, but what was left of the Navy in 1990 to 1991 was a result of the Reagan defense buildup. Fast forward to today, China's Navy is about twice the size of ours now. And it's not just cheap, poorly constructed ships. They have modern equipment. They're building at a rapid rate. They have more shipyards building Navy ships right now in China than we have total shipyards in the United States building all kinds of ships. They're building nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. They're building nuclear submarines, including ballistic missile submarines. They're building destroyers and frigates modeled after our Aegis system. And they've stolen a lot of this technology from us, and they've been given some of this technology by our tech industry, unfortunately. In this day and age, there's almost nothing in the tech industry that's not dual use. And you've got big tech industries in the United States that are actually partnering with the Chinese government. When you give the Red Chinese government tech, you owe me a six-pack. When you give the Red Chinese government technical know-how to make computers faster, help them build buildings better, help them build airliners better, things like that, they can then take that same tech, and they have, and apply it to military applications. Processing speeds in computers is the key to so much today. And that has enabled them to modernize their military at an unprecedented rate. So we have enabled our enemy, the Red Chinese, to target us with modern weapons, and we have paid for it. So pat yourselves on the back. This is the new Cold War. You're funding both sides of this one. In the first one, we were just funding our side. But this time, you get the privilege of funding both sides. It's got to stop. And I think President Trump wants to stop it. I think he recognizes it. But there's a lot of people in the swamp, and there's a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who don't believe that. The Wuhan virus came out of that virology lab. I'm convinced of that. I don't believe anybody that says that it just occurred naturally. I don't know whether it was done intentionally or whether it was done through neglect. But I know this. When it did escape, they covered it up. They lied to the world. They put their thumb on the World Health Organization, the head of which they had installed. God from Ethiopia, who knew much about health, is my two golden retrievers. And they lied to the world about the virus. And then they continued to allow citizens from the Wuhan area to travel internationally, but not within China. So they sent out people that spread the virus to the world. That's evil. That's just flat out evil. That's communism in a nutshell. And I'm going to get to this again when I talk about Antifa. But there was a time in my lifetime when communism was a four-letter word. If you're a communist, that was bad. Evidently, they stopped teaching that at some point in school and in colleges. I used the term Marxist in a dialogue that I had with somebody who was of the younger generation. They didn't know that Marxism was communism. It's like we have a huge education challenge, things that most of the people in this room, and excuse me ladies, I'm not trying to say you're old, But most of the people in this room took for granted things about communism and Marxism. And now we have to start all over again with this generation. That's how an organization like Antifa gets started. Because they're not being taught, even at LSU, that communism is a bad thing. And there's a couple of connections here. This is going to allow me to transition into Antifa. First of all, the Chinese, one of the things that they've done to influence our society and our operations governmentally and educationally is they have thrown a lot of money at our colleges and universities. For instance, and who here is an LSU fan? Right.
LSU thing. Oh.
It's not that important, but this is adding a little humor to it. You know, there were 2 universities in the United States, actually 3 universities in the United States, that partnered with the Wuhan virology lab. University of North Texas, Harvard, which you got to figure Harvard, because they're practically communist anyway. And then the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. But I shouldn't pick on any of those universities because the Chinese have thrown so much money around. And there's been 54 professors in the United States who are either being investigated for or have already been indicted or have even been convicted for taking money from the Chinese government and not reporting it as government contractors. So they're working for our government and they're taking money from the Chinese and they're not telling our government. That's one of the requirements when you do work for our government. You know, you're taking money from any foreign governments, we want to know about it. And 54 of these people just forgot. 54 professors. But almost all the major universities have received foreign money. Actually, and I think Tom Shedler may or may not remember this, but when he was a state senator, we got a bill passed in Louisiana. It's the same bill we got passed in Utah and New York. And we got it done in Florida through their board of regents system for their universities there. Requiring state colleges and universities in Louisiana to disclose and make transparent all foreign funding and donations. One of only a few states in the whole country that did that. Now, a lot of states are interested in that for obvious reasons. Like I've been in touch with people in Alabama. They all of a sudden want to know, well, maybe we need to figure out why someone thought it was a good idea for us to partner with the Chinese government virology lab. But one of the things that I'm going to work on with somebody here locally is to do a FOIA request to find out if LSU's been taking money from the Chinese. I would be surprised if they weren't, because they'd be an exception to the rule. I'm not trying to pick on LSU, believe me, I'm an LSU fan. But this country, we have to start getting smart again. And we can't let an adversary have so much influence over our colleges and universities. We need to take back the education system in this country. We've lost control over it. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. You wonder how all these Antifa types get started in college? It's because they're being taught things that are absolutely toxic. Because there's so many professors who are toxic. Communism, for the most part, was thrown, as President Reagan said, into the ash bin of history. And it's alive and well on college campuses in the U.S. and a few other outposts like in Seattle here in the United States. It shouldn't be that way. But it is. that's how organizations like Antifa recruit. And there's a parallel between China and Antifa. And I wrote a piece for the Hayride that just got published today. August of 1966. August of 1966, I was 3 years old. I don't have a whole lot of memory of August of 1966. But in August of 1966, groups of students banded together and started carrying out acts of violence and intimidation to promote a political agenda. And they did so with the tacit support of government officials. They started off by intimidating people that they did not agree with. They resorted to some violence. They destroyed property. And they eventually started killing people. Does that sound kind of familiar? This was in China. It was called the Cultural Revolution. And the groups of students were called the Red Guards. Red Guards were Chinese students who were working for Mao Zedong, the father of communism in China. And he got it in his mind that communism was not doing well in China. And he thought it was because of the four olds. OLDS, the four olds. Basically, old culture, old philosophy, old politics, old ideas. Anything pre-communist, essentially. And he energized these groups of students who became known as the Red Guards to replace the four olds with new things, communist things. Even though communism came to China in 1949, it wasn't thriving. He wanted it to thrive. So he needed scapegoats. So they started seizing literature, banning books, going into people's houses and destroying art, destroying examples of Chinese architecture, ancient Chinese architecture, desecrating cemeteries, and yes, pulling down monuments. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Now, even Mao eventually had to turn against the Red Guards because he was afraid they would get too powerful and they'd become rivals. So he did away with them. They ended up in the summer of 1966 killing about 10,000 people in their reign of terror in China. It never got really reported much outside of China, because you have to remember, Mao was the largest mass murderer of the 20th century. He killed more people than Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot combined. He killed 70 million people, either through forced starvation, execution, or exposure. 70 million people. So 10,000 people was just a drop in the bucket for him, so nobody thought it was any big deal. Fast forward to the 1970s in West Germany, where you saw the rejuvenation of a movement which had been active in Germany in the 1930s called Antifa. It's short for anti-fascism. Started in West Germany in the 1970s. It spun off an organization called the Red Army Faction, which was a terrorist organization. Who do you think the Red Army Faction modeled its ideology after? Mao Zedong. Same guy. Antifa worked its way to the United States. has factions all over the country today. They even have a faction in Austin, Texas. You know what they call themselves? The Red Guards. That is what is known in law enforcement as a clue. What we're seeing in America today is an armed insurrection. Using violence, intimidation. It's got almost nothing to do with George Floyd. Anybody thinks that all this stuff started spontaneously as a result of outrage over the killing of George Floyd just hadn't been paying attention. I started doing research into Antifa back in June of 2019, and wrote an article in July of 2019, wrote a report saying that they need to be designated a foreign terrorist organization. And the reason they need to be designated a foreign terrorist organization is for a specific reason. Number one, they have factions in 18 different countries by their own admission. So they are a terrorist group of global reach. So it is proper to designate them a foreign terrorist organization. But even more so, it's important that they be designated a foreign terrorist organization because that makes it almost impossible for people in the United States to support their efforts. If an organization or person in the United States is found to be supporting a designated foreign terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, or Boko Haram, or one of the jihadi groups that we talk about over and over again, any foreign terrorist organization, if you support that foreign terrorist organization, you're subject to enforcement by an organization called OFAC, OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the Treasury Department. And they can shut you down and seize your assets. Like that. Very similar to the way the IRS works. They can come in and do it and not really have to tell you why they're doing it. And they've done it to a lot of Islamic charities in this country over the years. We're found to be supporting jihadist groups, particularly Hamas. So it's important that Antifa be designated a foreign terrorist organization. Is there anybody in this room right now, I'd love to hear, who doesn't think that Antifa are terrorists? Because let me tell you, it seems like the whole Democrat Party doesn't think they're terrorists. Doesn't seem like CNN thinks they're terrorists. I mean, it's almost surreal. And I've stopped watching TV news for the most part. I just can't take it anymore. But there was a point when the riots first started breaking out, and there was a CNN reporter, and he was standing there with his mic, and he's sitting there, and he's saying that the protests are mostly nonviolent. And there's a building blowing up behind him. Right behind him. What was that movie, Naked Gun? Yeah. Stay calm, nothing to see here. Remember that scene with Leslie Nielsen? You can't make this stuff up. It writes itself. So, let's talk about Antifa. What are they after? They're after the overthrow of the government. And when I wrote my report back in July of 2019, I said, we've got an election coming up. They're going to try to disrupt the election. That's what this is about. This is not going to stop easily. And everybody at first thought they just wanted to take down Confederate monuments. So they got some sympathy for that. But then they moved on. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill. Mahatma Gandhi. So this isn't about the Confederacy. This is about tearing down all the olds. Just like the Red Guards did in China in the summer of 1966. They're following the communist playbook. There's nothing new under the sun. And until patriots start to get mad, it's not going to stop. And I'm not encouraging anybody out to go out and confront these people with violence. But we got to get mad and get energized and not just sit there and take this. All this virtue signaling, I even hate that term. It's just ridiculous. Apologizing for things that we're not responsible for. Apologizing for the color of your skin. I work with some black folks, and I know some black folks, and I can't find any of them that believe in that. I can't find any of them who support Black Lives Matter. Incidentally, Black Lives Matter. You know who it was founded by? 3 Marxists. I'm not saying that they're Marxists. They say that they're Marxists. They self-identify as Marxists. Now, the slogan Black Lives Matter and the hashtag is taking on a life of its own. So you got the NFL, and you got big corporations now who are signing on to the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And I assume that they're ignorant that the organization behind this was founded by Marxists, communists. Because I'd like to think that educated business people in the United States would not support a communist movement. But that's what it is. I'm not saying everybody that supports it or is involved in it is a communist. But it doesn't change the fact that it was founded by communists, and you read their dogma, and it's straight from the Communist Manifesto. I mean, it's like I woke up and it's 1975 again. We have a communist threat again. And that threat isn't just from foreigners. We've got a lot of communists here in this country. And they're seeking to overthrow our government and our way of life. And they're doing it by violence. And they will attack innocent people, as we've seen over and over again, to get their way. This was not a spontaneous reaction to George Floyd being killed. This is an organized, violent insurrection that's designed to disrupt the presidential election. And I think President Trump has been very smart in that I think they're trying to bait him into some type of action that will result in some type of Kent State type incident. And he's not taking the bait. I think that's very smart. We don't want federal troops in the streets. As enticing as that is, believe me, there's thoughts that I've had of that. But as enticing as that is, in counter-revolutionary warfare, the last thing you want is a heavy-handed military response. In this case, it would play right into their hands. As much sympathy as they're already getting from the media and from the Democrat Party, if something like that would have happened, it would be even worse. That would become the whole narrative between now and the rest of the election. President Trump's been very smart in this autonomous zone in Seattle. Let the idiots that have been running Seattle for decades handle that. And if they can't handle it, oh well. You know, you made your bed, and you lie in it. You notice that all these places where all this is happening, they're all Democrat strongholds. And some of the evidence that we have of at least tolerance of Antifa and the rioters is the fact that they ordered their police departments to stand down and essentially let it happen all over the country. Police have actually stood down while Antifa types have taken over their police precincts. Now, the only way a police officer would do that is if they were ordered to do so by politicians who are sympathetic with Antifa's cause. We've seen that all over. And in Seattle, all of a sudden, the mayor has got the clue because we're starting to see shootings and violence inside the autonomous zone. What do they call it? CHOP, CHAZ, whatever. We're starting to see violence in that zone. And there's no police there. So, well, we may have to go in there and take that down. You and what army? Because I doubt the cops have a whole lot of confidence in her leadership. This is the monster that she created. All over the country, there's a tolerance for this. They sit and they allow them to tear down these monuments. One day it was Robert E. Lee. The next day, it's the Holocaust Memorial in Southern California. And look, there's a definite anti-Semitic aspect to this whole movement. They attack Jewish targets, see flyers that they created, blaming Jewish Americans for a lot of problems that we see in our country. And even in New Orleans, the regime in New Orleans held a press conference day before yesterday, I think it was, the mayor and the head of the health department. They said there's a spike of Wuhan virus cases in New Orleans. And they didn't say anything about the fact that, there was rioters in the streets crowding around for days and days. They blamed it on 3 graduation parties held by Israel Newman School. And let me tell you, there's something more to that than just blaming it on Israel Newman School. I have to graduate from them. It's a predominantly Jewish institution. It's one of the best schools in the whole country. But if you think there's no anti-Semitism involved in blaming that school in particular for the spike in Wuhan virus cases, you're not paying attention. These people are really, really bad folks. And everybody in this room needs to get mad about it. They need to get mad about Antifa. They need to get mad about Marxism, communism, and Maoism. They need to get energized. You need to let your elected officials know this is something you care about. And you can tell them, quit capitulating. Quit giving in. Quit apologizing. Stand up to these people. The more you give, the more they're going to take. Show me some point in the past where appeasement worked. I can't find any examples of it, and that's what we're doing now. It's got to stop. With that, I'm going to close. I'm willing to take questions if I may.
Thank you, Chris, for being willing to take a few questions. I do ask that you keep your questions brief and not tell stories, because we want to hear as much from Chris as we can. Thank you.
Did you mention Kent State?
I did mention Kent State.
I'm from the north, I'm from Ohio, and I was like in 10th grade when it happened. course, the rioters were just not the students, other people joined in. Then they called in the National Guard because there were 2,000 people there. And then a lot of the kids were told to stay in on the day of riot, like, do not go outside, stay in. But they didn't. And so now we have the song, 4 Dead in Ohio. And what happened was, these kids just started storming the National Guard, and they just shot. And one student was out of protest, and the other 3 were. And as sad as it sounds to lose any life, it was over. It was over. You know? And to think of what could have happened had they not called in the National Guard, it's bottom line. And I live like 45 minutes away from them, so it was big news. But, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I will say this. Back in those days, the National Guard didn't really get any specialized riot training or any training in non-lethal force, non-lethal weapons. And today, the National Guard has a lot of capability and expertise in the use of non-lethal force and riot control. And much better. Those National Guardsmen were put in a very bad position in Kent State and really reacted. And the only thing they were trained to do, which was to use their M1 brands to protect themselves. They thought they were under threat. Today, I think that the training is much, much more sophisticated and better than the National Guard. And I don't think you'd see something like that happen, but I think Antifa would love to have something like Kent State happen, and they would feed off of that.
Exactly.
What?
I'll send it to you, but there is a new movement that's organized for Madison, Wisconsin, and they have, it's an Antifa type. I just wondered if you knew if this was a branch of Antifa, but they're training kids even as young as 12 years old to riot and to have the mentality of really stirring up trouble. Chris, could you?
She asked me about an organization called Sunrise Movement in Madison, Wisconsin. And it sounds like it's probably an Antifa faction. And Antifa has a lot of factions that aren't named Antifa. Like I mentioned, an affiliate that they had in Austin, Texas, which is called the Red Dogs. You know, you mentioned that they're recruiting 12-year-olds, right? There's a 14-year-old right now who has been incarcerated and is going to be indicted. He was an Antifa rioter, and there was a guy, an innocent bystander, who had been beat up by some thugs. And he was laying in the street, and this 14-year-old kid went and kicked him and knocked all his teeth out. 14 years old. 14 years old. So yeah, they started him early.
Well, you know, we all want to do something with behind how quickly they responded there. Floyd death.
Well, Madison, Wisconsin might as well be Leningrad, you know.
But
Oh.
they just descended, but it was Sunrise. The other thing is, if you think that it's not, think New Orleans is close to home, we've got the very beginnings of that with one of our school board members, one of our few Republican school board members, and she made a comment about Lee High School. We have the instigation of a very thing happening here in Baton Rouge with one of our school board members, one of our few Republican school board members, who made a comment about Lee High School, changing the name, and she is being tormented and threatened. And we heard, I don't know if they went through it last night, but the claim that they were going to protest at her house. And so it's very close to home. We need to get out there.
I grew up in New Orleans. I lived there for 42 years. I never once heard anybody say, you know, we need to get rid of Lee Circle. Never heard anybody mention it. And all of a sudden, last few years, everything was going to go to hell in a handbasket if we didn't get rid of Rob D. Lee and me circle. Yes, sir.
Just very briefly, what would a proper response from the government look like to these large congregations that are actually trying to incite violence? If the police are out there just helping with things, whatever. I mean, just very briefly, if you can describe how do you handle a massive mob like that properly?
Well, I'm not opposed to using force. I just don't want it to be a federal force. I believe that the police and the National Guard are the proper organizations to deal with that. I'm a big believer in CS. When I was in the military, I got the pleasure of going through the CS chamber, and I can tell you that CS tear gas is no fun. And if you apply CS liberally, you can disperse the crowd, I promise you. And those surgical masks that people have on, that's not going to keep you from getting screwed up by CS, I promise you. And they complain about riot police using CS. There's a reason that they complain, because it's effective. And, I think using non-lethal force, many different methods of non-lethal force, including CS, to disperse the crowds, I'm a big believer in that. Mr. Shedler.
Just everybody, this guy here has been doing this a long time. I remember working with him, and he's a true patriot and soldier. I'm sure you'll see. Do you have evidence, or is anyone with Soros involved with a lot of this? Y'all remember a lot of the members here that the last 10 years that I've been involved with the suits we had from Justice and then from their affiliated group. That was George Soros. Right. There was a project, I was one of the targeted 15 secretaries of state to get rid of by George Soros. It's called the SOS Project. He got rid of 9. So they've been working on this for a long, long time. Your comments on that, and then Debbie, after you leave, I have something that show I saw on Sunday night that everybody in this room needs to look at. Red Bear, Fox Nation. It was fabulous. It's everything Chris just said. It goes back all the way down to Mao, Stalin, and brings it all the way down to Cortez and Bernie Sanders. A 2-hour show is fabulous.
Mr. Chairman brings up a great point. I had forgotten that you had interaction with Soros organization. I was targeted by Soros myself. He used to fund an organization called Think Progress. And they targeted work that I was doing around the country on legislation called American Laws and American Courts. And that legislation says that in a state court in this state cannot apply a foreign law or a foreign legal doctrine if the application of that foreign law or foreign legal doctrine would violate anybody's fundamental constitutional rights. And Soros really did not like that legislation. So Think Progress was following me around. And somewhere on YouTube there is a video of me in a parking lot in Nashville having a confrontation with a couple of Think Progress guys. At least it used to be up there, but Think Progress went out of business. But in terms of the role that Soros is playing in this, George Soros put up, I think it was $18 million spread across 206 different nonprofit organizations. And all of those nonprofit organizations are leftist. Some of them are way to the left. And funnels money to the leftist movement around the world through that methodology, through his Open Society Foundation. And that's the way he gets money to causes that he likes. It's probably going to be difficult to find a direct line from George Soros to Antifa, but my guess is there is a connection between the organizations that he supports and some of these Antifa and Black Lives Matter organizations that are carrying out these protests in the streets that are turning violent. So I don't have hard evidence that George Soros wrote a check to someone in active violence, but it's been throwing so much money around in those circles for so long, for so many organizations, that he's the biggest funder. It makes sense. I also believe that the Chinese government has been involved in this. And FBI director announced just in the last 2 days that they are investigating foreign government involvement in this. And I think that the Chinese government benefits most from this right now of any government in the world. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Yes. All this news and everything that's going on. Just today I saw, I can't remember if it was the CEO or the editor of Psychology talking about how in 2016 and 2018 there was some manipulation from Google and Facebook in terms of leaning towards the liberal side, and that he expects the 2020 election to have a lot of that just by, it doesn't cost them a penny, just by putting out that don't vote to just the people on their sites that they know are liberal. So what is your recommendation for us to do, since it seems like most of the media and technology is controlled by the left, to get our movement going and get people to the polls?
Good question. I don't really have all the answers, but many of you couldn't hear her. I think what she was saying is that big tech is way to the left, and Google and Facebook as examples, I believe, have manipulated data to reduce traffic to conservatives and conservative causes. Is that basically what you were saying?
Yes.
I believe that happens. You got a guy here locally named Scott McKay that runs the Hayride. And he used to get a lot of traffic to his site from Google. And it went away one day, just like turning off the water. And that didn't happen by accident. I have a colleague named Robert Spencer that has a website called Gmail Watch. He's familiar with that as well. He's an expert on Gmail. Same thing happened to him in the same time frame. He used to get a lot of traffic via Google, and then one day it just stopped. So I do believe that there is manipulation. I believe that Facebook is run by leftists, and I know that they have a Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer on their fact-checking committee. Twitter is run by leftists. There are alternative social media out there that don't get as much traffic yet, but hopefully they will get more traffic. I'd love to see President Trump one day just say, I'm switching parlay. He's got such a huge following that if he were to leave Twitter and say, I'm going somewhere else, that would hurt Twitter big time. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yes, ma'am, right here. I have heard that Apple is actually trying to decouple from China to some extent. That they're moving some of their manufacturing to India. I've heard that. I'm not an expert on Apple, but I do know this, that a couple years ago, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff gave a speech in which he pointed out that Google, as an example, was refusing to work with the U.S. Department of Defense at the same time that it was working with the Chinese government. That's just inexcusable. It's surreal. It's the kind of stuff that when you first hear it, you say, well, it can't be true, but then you realize, this is the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. We have a lot of people in our country proclaim for the other team. I'm going to kill Joyce.
Last night, the Blaze TV. But it was following the money with the sources of funding for Black Lives Matter. And there are some scary people in that mix, and most of them are white Marxists. Have been Marxists for some time.
Yeah, who's U.S. Portland, Berkeley, Seattle. You were asking what other hotspots of liberalism there are in this country. Austin, Texas is one of them. Portland, Oregon is really bad. Berkeley, California is really bad. Nancy Pelosi's district. Parts of Washington, D.C. pretty bad. You know, these are liberal strongholds and radical leftist strongholds in a lot of these places. But Madison, Wisconsin was, bad back in the 60s.
If I would just add something real quick, Chris was talking about the new social media app, Parler, P-A-R-L-E-R, or they call it Parlay.
I don't know how to pronounce it, so you probably
Parlay. Please sign up. It's a conservative app. Of course, they're trying to shut it down, but they got great patriots on there. And wonderful President Trump came over there.
What's the name of it?
Really, really good. Parlay, P-A-R-L-E-R. Parlay. Thank you. Yeah.
Incidentally, I've got business cards. If anybody would like to connect with me on social media, I'll give out as many business cards as I can. I'd love to connect with y'all on social media and email. So I'll just give out business cards. Anybody would like to connect, send me an email.
And then just one last thing. Glenn Beck, I know y'all are familiar with him. He has on YouTube, I heard about it, the Democratic Highway. You need to watch that. He talks about eye-opening and scaring the bejesus out of you. Democratic Highway.
I couldn't hear.
Hydra, H-Y-D-R-A.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, right there.
Question, you know that colleges and universities are hotbeds for flippant kids that were raped, right, to be crazy? And I'm just, what's the book that they use to get them to consider in a socialist way?
Well, a lot of it is just simply differential in power. If you got a professor that's telling you that you have to answer a question a certain way, if you get a good grade, you're going to do it that way. And I have a daughter in college that has experienced that. When I was in college in the 80s, Ronald Reagan was wildly popular on college campuses. It was completely different from the way it is now. But there were professors on college campuses back then that didn't like the fact that Reagan was popular. But they couldn't really do much about it because students loved Reagan. Now, I think that the left took that to heart, and they planned over a period of time that they were going to retake college campuses. And you look at all these, there's so many Marxists on college campuses, it's unbelievable. You can't hardly find a Marxist anywhere in this country. You go on any major college campus in this country, they'll hit one. I mean, they're all over the place. It's the only place that those people can get gainful employment is on the college campus, and then they get tenure, and you can't get rid of them. It's a real problem. It's North Newman. It's where Pat Manning was and me. Mr. Schindler, yes.
Chris, let me real quick to reinforce what you said and to show everybody in here just how even in a little state like Louisiana, Chris is telling you the truth. I'll give you two answers. These governments, Russia, Chinese, and the like, make routine trips to folks like me as Secretary of State when I was there. They still do. They come in under the auspices out of the embassy out of Houston, and they visit. And the whole purpose is very simple. And by law, of course, I had to notify FBI of those potential visits before I agreed to it. And were wired while the FBI was in the next room. You'd be amazed at the way that they try to get information on something as simple as Louisiana's election system and every state. And I'll tell you one other little story. Y'all heard the name of the company Huawei?
Yes.
Chinese, big telecommunications. Let me just tell you how they operate. They were connected or got involved with CenturyLink, big Fortune 500 company out of Monroe. I'm not implying anything that CenturyLink did wrong, which is many years ago. But we have a museum called Claire Chennault Museum. General Claire Chennault was fighting tigers in China, Japanese. And they come in, and the lady who ran that museum for me was Claire Chennault's granddaughter. And they had invited her to China and made friends with her. They wanted to donate money to us for a new museum. They got involved with the university there. And of course, going back a ways, I contacted the government. Going back almost 10 years, 8 years, I was warned to stay away from them because they were trying to come in and donate money to this little insignificant museum in Monroe, Louisiana, in the school. They went involved with Century, and it's no longer. But just to show you how they operate, they embed themselves in communities under the auspices of doing good and writing a check. That is what you're saying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheldon. And that's something, they have a program on college campuses all over the world to try to attract professors to work for the Chinese government. It's called their Talents Program. And they use that to throw money around and get these professors to work for them. And very often it's professors in technical fields, including nuclear things, you know, stuff that we shouldn't be talking to anybody about, to be honest with you. And the Chinese just they throw a lot of money around. The same way that the Saudis did for a long time. If you got money, people will look the other way for you. And we need to stop that. Somebody else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm very interested in how we stop that. You told me that we've got a problem. And so I would be interested in your thoughts on that. And secondly, we've talked a lot about universities and that kind of being the beginning of this resurgence of socialism. I don't know how many of you have heard of Turning Point, but they are doing a heroic job on college campuses to really promote conservative ideas. So, if you don't know about them, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, which people have done a lot of it. Trump spoke in Arizona at a Turning Point speech. They're doing a really good job on college campuses. But I would be interested in what you think we can do.
Well, there's a couple things. Here in Louisiana, we already have a law that says that LSU and other state colleges and universities have to disclose foreign donations. I would suggest that we scrutinize the foreign donations, and when the donations appear to be improper, that the legislature and the governor act to stop that. Well, I'll tell you a little story about the governor and that very legislation with that. When we had that legislation in Louisiana, we were basing it off the fact that Osama bin Laden, the secretary, a guy named Wadi al-Hajj, attended what was then called the University of Southwestern Louisiana on a scholarship provided by the Kuwaiti government. And then the number 3 guy in Hamas, a guy named Marzouk, got his PhD Louisiana Tech. We circulated that amongst the members of the Louisiana legislature to promote the fact that there needed to be transparency on foreign funding to Louisiana's colleges and universities. And one particular legislator came up to me and cornered me and told me, he asked me, why are we doing this? This is so stupid. And that guy's name was John Bell Evans. And I knew I had the votes for it, so I didn't really pay attention. I didn't really know the guy. I wasn't really that interested in his opinion. And the vote occurred, and it passed overwhelmingly, and guess what? He voted for it. It was stupid, but he didn't want to go on record and vote against it. Kind of shows you something about him. But I think in other states around the country, we need disclosure, we need transparency. We need to know who's funding these colleges and universities, and then once we have the information, we can get your elected officials to stop it. For instance, if somebody in Alabama knew that the University of Alabama was partnering with the Wuhan biology lab, there may have been an opportunity to maybe stop that. That's the kind of thing that we need to have done in the future. But without the information, there's nothing you can do. So we need the transparency and disclosure, first of all. Yes, ma'am.
Early on, I heard that the Tulane Primate Center in Covington was involved in research.
They're a private university, so the legislation that we passed in Louisiana doesn't apply to them since they're private. You know, you have to go after the Tulane alumni and the Tulane supporters and try to get them to scrutinize that, you know, unfortunately. Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. You can't compel a private organization to disclose those things. But what we need is probably a law that says that if you receive state funds, you have to disclose that. Maybe that can be done. But we'll see if that can happen.
I'm just gonna ask, do you feel we're heading for civil war?
And I get asked that question a lot. What we're seeing is an insurrection. There's no question about that. You know, when people think of Civil War, they think of what we experienced here in this country between 1861 and 1865, which is not typical of most Civil Wars, because there's a geographic split between the two sides. I think more than just that type of scenario, I think we've got an insurrection. We've got communist guerrillas working in our midst. Now, I don't think it's a situation that I think we can take them down. I think we can do it relatively quickly, if we give law enforcement and intelligence agencies the tools that they need. Number one, we need to declare Antifa a foreign terrorist organization. It has not happened. It needs to happen. Absolutely needs to be designated a foreign terrorist organization. And then I think we need to use RICO to go after these organizations as well. In Louisiana, we passed a law here several years ago called Andy's Law, which empowers victims of terrorism to pursue terrorist organizations civilly and receive treble damages and attorney's fees for any damages that they may have incurred. So if you've got a business and Antifa comes along and burns it down during a riot, you can find out who to sue, some enterprising plaintiff's attorney that we all love to hate, then have an incentive to go after those people. So those are the kind of things that we can use to pursue Antifa. Racketeering laws on the federal and state level, and for especially designated foreign terrorist organizations. That opens up a whole can of worms on them. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.